The moment I unpacked the last box in my new home, I felt the weight of judgment pressing down upon me. The neighborhood was pristine, each lawn manicured to perfection, and the homes bore a subtle, almost stifling conformity that screamed of an unwritten code. It didn't take long for me to realize that I wasn't just moving into a house. I was stepping into a minefield of societal expectations dictated by the homeowners association. From day one, I sensed their distrust. I wasn't the type they wanted. My casual style and eclectic decor clashed with their monochrome ideals. The whispers started almost immediately, passing quickly from neighbor to neighbor like a game of telephone. Their discontent took shape in the form of endless fines for minor infractions, an untrimmed hedge here, a misplaced garden gnome there. They believed all these petty rules would bend me to their will, but rather than cower, I stood firm. With every fine that arrived in my mailbox, I felt a spark ignite within me. This wasn't just about a garden gnome or a dandelion sprouting through the sidewalk. It was about reclaiming control of my own life in a community that sought to impose its will upon me. Yet as their attempts to intimidate escalated, so did their resolve to eliminate me. I was stunned when I first learned they had stooped low enough to file false complaints against me, alleging that my property was being used for illegal activity. Their cowardice was transparent, a desperate final push to force me out and silence my defiance. What they didn't realize was that beneath my exterior lay a seasoned FBI agent trained to navigate the murky waters of corruption and deceit. While they plotted my removal, I began gathering evidence against them, documenting their every move with meticulous care. The stage was being set. I wasn't just going to defend myself. I would expose their corruption and bring justice not just for myself, but for anyone else who dared to resist their oppressive regime. Little did they know that soon enough they would be the ones facing consequences. The tables would turn dramatically. The Homeowners Association was relentless in its pursuit of conformity, employing a range of tactics designed to maintain their ideal standard of living. Each resident was bound by an intricate set of rules, outlined in an overstuffed handbook that read like a legal tome. They created a culture where even the slightest deviation from the norm was met with swift penalties, transforming minor infractions into major controversies. The first fine I received was for not having my mailbox painted in the community-approved shade of beige. My vibrant colors were met with stern disapproval, and I quickly learned how affectionately they referred to it as the color police. Such ridiculousness had me questioning how far their control extended. Soon enough, I was inundated with other fines, some for having too many visible outdoor decorations, others for what they deemed an untidy lawn. It was like being trapped in a game where the rules changed at their whim. Every time I refused to comply or contested their decisions, the fines became more severe. Their strategy was transparent: wear me down financially until I either conformed or fled. My boldness only seemed to fuel their determination to expel me from the neighborhood. Each citation that arrived in my mailbox felt less about maintaining aesthetics and more about enforcing their rigid hierarchy. And they had a knack for subtle intimidation. At community meetings, whispered comments would flow like poison, their disdain woven through polite exchanges masked as concern for property values. I witnessed neighbors bowing to their demands out of fear of reprisals, like not being invited to neighborhood barbecues or receiving anonymous notes threatening to report them for minute infractions. When feelings of rebellion bubbled within me, they turned to more drastic measures. They resorted to fabricating complaints about illegal activities happening at my home, escalating their efforts to drive me away and declare me a disruptive element in their perfect little world. It was evident they seemingly believed that by maintaining strict control and eliminating anyone who didn't fit their mold, they could uphold a facade of security in their community, even if it meant trampling on individual rights. Little did they know, their threats would create a storm they weren't prepared to weather. Determination coursed through my veins as the HOA intensified their attempts to force me out. Each fine, each whispered comment from my neighbors only solidified my resolve to stand my ground against their bullying. I could have easily succumbed to the pressure, thrown up my hands in defeat, and conformed to their rigid expectations, but something inside me ignited a fierce sense of defiance. I began to embrace the very qualities they sought to suppress, the vibrancy of my decor and the individuality that set me apart. Gone were the days of feeling like an unwelcome guest in a place I owned. Instead, I transformed my home into a sanctuary that celebrated diversity rather than stifled it. My garden, once filled with the timid blooms they deemed acceptable, burst with color. Flowers danced in hues they would have never approved. I plastered a welcoming sign on my door that read, "All are welcome here," bold, and bright for all to see. Their intimidation tactics only fueled my desire to fight back. As they sent increasingly aggressive letters threatening legal action, I took them as badges of honor, proving that I had struck a nerve. I started documenting everything: the fines, the harassing notes, the absurd claims about illegal activities. Each piece of evidence became ammunition in my battle against their oppressive regime. Neighbors who had once avoided eye contact with me now began to watch silently as I stood tall. Some even shared stories of their own experiences with the HOA's iron fist, revealing that I was far from alone in this struggle. It felt liberating to connect with others who had faced similar intimidation, and it reinforced my belief that standing up for oneself was a communal act of courage. Knowing what they deemed normal would never encompass the entirety of human expression spurred me onward. They may have thought they could silence me with threats and accusations, but their efforts only served to strengthen my resolve. I was more than just a target. I was an agent of change in this battle against conformity, a role I was ready to embrace fully as I prepared for what lay ahead. The real challenge was yet to come, but I felt electrified by the prospect of turning the tables on them. The tension reached a boiling point when the HOA escalated their campaign against me with an audacious move. They filed false complaints to the local police, claiming that my property was being utilized for illegal activity. I received a knock at my door one evening, and as I opened it, I was met by two uniformed officers who looked both concerned and confused. They informed me of the accusations against me, and for a moment I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. It was surreal to be framed as a criminal in my own home, especially by those who claimed to uphold community standards. The officers were polite but firm, asking if I would allow them to search my residence. That moment made me wonder how many others had been falsely accused, all because someone with power thought they could get away with it. Sometimes the truth is only revealed when you refuse to back down, kind of like when you subscribe to this channel and suddenly find yourself always ahead of the story. But back to what happened next. I could see in their eyes that they were just doing their job, caught in the crossfire of this bizarre situation. I granted them permission, confident that nothing would be found to substantiate the HOA's ludicrous claims. As they perused my home, I felt an odd mix of anger and determination bubbling inside me. They left empty-handed, but the HOA's brazen attempt to involve law enforcement crossed a line that could not be ignored. It was no longer just about petty fines and complaints. They had tried to weaponize the very system meant to protect us. In the days following the incident, I shifted gears. Up until that point, I had been documenting their harassment quietly, but now I recognized the urgency of my situation. Fueled by indignation and a sense of impending justice, I meticulously compiled all evidence of their corruption: fines, letters, and testimonies from other residents who had endured similar treatment. I decided to confront them directly at the next HOA meeting. As I stood up to speak, the room fell silent, eyes wide with curiosity and caution. I detailed their actions, from filing false complaints to threatening my livelihood. Their faces shifted from smug confidence to visible panic as I laid out my evidence for everyone to hear. What they didn't realize was that their attempt to frame me as a criminal had inadvertently ignited a firestorm against them. With each revelation, I felt empowered. No longer was I simply a victim, but an agent of change ready to hold them accountable for their abuses of power. The storm was brewing, and they were about to feel its full force. As I prepared to confront the HOA at the upcoming meeting, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was a pivotal moment, not just for me, but for anyone else they had wronged. The very skills that had earned me accolades during my years as an FBI agent now felt crucial in this fight against their abuse of power. My background in investigating corruption and gathering evidence would serve me well as I meticulously built my case. During my time with the FBI, I had specialized in white-collar crime, exposing fraud schemes and corrupt practices behind closed doors. I was no stranger to navigating the intricate web of deceit that often envelops those in power. I remembered training sessions focused on surveillance, documentation, and how to compile compelling evidence that could withstand scrutiny in court. Those lessons were echoing louder than ever as I prepared to face off against this homeowners association. With each passing day, I immersed myself deeper into research and analysis, treating this as any major case. I organized piles of paperwork, letters, notices, photographs, and created a comprehensive timeline of events that highlighted their increasingly desperate attempts to intimidate me. I cross-referenced their seemingly arbitrary fines with state regulations and community standards to showcase just how far beyond reasonable they had gone. My contacts from my previous career also became invaluable resources. A few trusted former colleagues offered advice on presenting evidence effectively, while others provided insights into legal strategies that could strengthen my position. It felt empowering to draw on this network as a way to counteract their lies with facts. When the meeting finally arrived, my heart raced with anticipation and defiance. As I stood before the board and an audience of curious neighbors, I exuded a confidence born from years of facing adversaries in high-stakes situations. This wasn't just about reclaiming my own home. It was about dismantling an apparatus of intimidation that had silenced too many voices. I laid out my findings clearly and concisely, my voice steady as I revealed their misdeeds. Each word served as both a shield against their accusations and a sword aimed at their corruption. In drawing on my past experience, what started as a personal battle transformed into a powerful stand against oppression, igniting hope among those who felt powerless within their own homes. Little did they know, they had awakened an investigator determined to uncover the truth and seek justice. In the months leading up to the confrontation, I embarked on a covert mission to gather every piece of evidence that would expose the HOA's misconduct. My training as an FBI agent guided me as I developed a systematic approach to documenting their corruption and harassment. I knew that every detail mattered, so I treated this as a case worthy of serious investigation. I started by keeping a detailed journal, meticulously logging each interaction with the HOA. Each fine received, each warning letter, and every snide comment from board members or neighbors were documented, creating a timeline that painted a clear picture of their escalating intimidation tactics. I made sure to save every piece of correspondence. Those letters filled with threats and accusations became essential artifacts in my case. I also turned to technology for assistance. Using my phone discreetly, I recorded conversations during HOA meetings, capturing their dismissive remarks and the blatant fabrications they echoed about my property. These recordings served as irrefutable proof of their misconduct, revealing their true intentions behind the veneer of community standards and regulations. To enhance my evidence, I engaged with other residents who had faced similar harassment. I set up informal gatherings under the pretense of neighborhood watch meetings, but in reality, these served as an opportunity to collect testimonies. Several neighbors shared stories of unjust fines and bizarre complaints, and I encouraged them to document their experiences as well. Their accounts not only validated my own, but also highlighted a pattern of abuse that stretched far beyond my situation. On weekends, I reviewed municipal codes and HOA regulations, cross-referencing them with the fines I had received. Many penalties levied against me lacked any legal basis. With each revelation, my confidence grew. I was slowly building an unassailable case against them. As tensions mounted, their desperation became evident through their increasingly aggressive tactics. Their actions only reinforced my resolve to gather more evidence and prepare for the inevitable showdown. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about protecting my rights. It was about exposing a corrupt system willing to trample on innocent lives to uphold its power. With my arsenal of evidence accumulating, I felt empowered for what was to come. They had no idea that their attempts at intimidation would soon culminate in their own downfall, one that I was determined to orchestrate. The turning point arrived with an urgent email from the board, summoning me to a special meeting. My instincts prickled with apprehension. Their desperation was palpable. As I walked into the polished conference room, filled with HOA members whose faces betrayed a mixture of arrogance and concern, I could feel the weight of my evidence pressing down on me like a tightly coiled spring. What they didn't know was that I had reached my breaking point. Their incessant harassment had transformed from mere annoyance into something far more insidious. I had documented their malicious tactics and their attempts to frame me as a criminal. Now it felt like time to act decisively. As the meeting commenced, I listened to their rehearsed facade of indignation as they repeatedly claimed that my presence was detrimental to community values. But with each unsubstantiated claim they made against me, anger surged through me. The condescending remarks were a thin veil for their fear of someone who refused to be controlled. With my heart racing, I stood up. The murmurs of discontent in the room faded as I began laying out my findings. My voice was steady but firm as I presented evidence. Copies of unlawful fines, transcripts of recorded meetings where board members openly expressed contempt for anyone who dared challenge them, and testimonies from fellow residents detailing similar experiences of harassment. The atmosphere shifted when I revealed my plan to escalate matters beyond their reach. "You think you can intimidate me," I stated boldly. You've crossed the line into criminal behavior. I'm not just going to sit back and let this continue. With each word, I felt a surge of empowerment wash over me. I was no longer a victim, but a force to be reckoned with. When the meeting ended, rather than retreating in fear, I took further steps to involve federal authorities, preparing a comprehensive case against the entire HOA board. I meticulously crafted my complaint for submission, incorporating all the evidence collected over months, a multifaceted illustration of fraud, harassment, and abuse of power. This would not merely be a fight for personal justice, but a declaration that such oppressive tactics would not stand unchecked. In that moment, transformation solidified within me. What began as an experience of oppression had morphed into a powerful crusade for justice, and I was ready for the battle ahead. They thought they could silence me. Instead, they had unleashed an investigator fueled by determination and an unwavering sense of purpose. With my evidence meticulously compiled and the determination to seek justice burning brightly within me, I proceeded to file federal charges against the entire HOA board. This was not merely about reclaiming my own peace of mind. It was about dismantling a corrupt regime that had bullied not just me, but potentially countless others in our community. The first step in the legal process involved submitting a formal complaint to the appropriate federal agency. Throughout this process, I relied on my understanding of procedural law gained during my years as an FBI agent. Crafting the document required precision and clarity. Every piece of evidence had to be organized logically, painting a vivid picture of their wrongdoing. My complaint detailed key allegations: fraud through unjust fines, harassment targeting myself and other residents, and abuse of authority when they attempted to weaponize local law enforcement against me. Once submitted, I knew the importance of following up diligently. I reached out to various officials, ensuring my case was taken seriously. The intent was clear. I wanted them to see that this wasn't a baseless grievance fueled by personal vendettas, but rather a systemic issue affecting community integrity. I also retained legal counsel who understood both local laws and federal procedures. Working closely with an attorney with experience in civil rights cases fortified my position. Together, we crafted a strategy focused on presenting irrefutable evidence of the HOA's misconduct while highlighting the psychological impact their actions had on residents like me. After several weeks, I received notification that the case had been accepted for investigation, a significant milestone that marked a shift in momentum. With each day that passed, it became increasingly evident that the board's actions had not only drawn legal attention, but also sparked interest from local media outlets eager to expose corruption. As news spread about the charges filed against them, dissent began to grow within the community itself. Neighbors who once remained silent now approached me with offers of support, sharing their own accounts of intimidation and unfair treatment at the hands of the HOA. Their testimonies reinforced our case and added weight to what I had already documented. Empowered by this unexpected wave of solidarity, I felt an exhilarating sense of purpose. We were no longer isolated individuals cowering under their oppressive tactics, but rather a collective force ready to challenge injustice head-on. Little did they know that what started as an attempt to silence me had instead ignited a movement, one that would demand accountability and change from those who thought they were untouchable. As the news of my federal charges against the HOA board spread through the community, a seismic shift occurred in our neighborhood. What had started as an isolated fight quickly became a rallying cry for those who had long suffered under the weight of the HOA's oppressive rules. Conversations that had once taken place in whispers began to resonate louder as neighbors realized they were not alone in their grievances. Local media outlets became interested in the unfolding scandal, amplifying our efforts. Articles appeared highlighting the allegations of fraud and harassment, detailing how the HOA had attempted to stifle dissent and control its residents with intimidation tactics. Residents who had lived in fear of being fined or ostracized suddenly felt emboldened to speak out. They reached out, expressing their support and sharing their own troubling experiences with the HOA, fines for trivial matters, unjust accusations, and veiled threats that had silenced many voices. I began holding informal community meetings at local parks, where residents could come together to discuss their stories and gather strength from one another. These gatherings quickly transformed into a movement. Folks realized that what had been dismissed as minor inconveniences were part of a larger pattern of systemic abuse by the HOA board. Neighbors exchanged phone numbers and grew bolder in sharing strategies about how to challenge HOA mandates and protect their rights as homeowners. The atmosphere shifted from one of fear to defiance, and it was clear that the board's attempts to remove me had galvanized a collective spirit within our community. Social media buzzed with posts about our cause, empowering even more residents to stand against the corruption. Hashtags like HOA Revolution trended locally as people rallied around our pursuit of accountability. As more residents joined our efforts, I found allies who were willing to sign on as co-plaintiffs in my case against the board. Each signature represented a story of injustice. Together, we painted a picture of a community unwilling to tolerate oppression any longer. In this newfound solidarity, I felt an exhilarating surge of momentum. The HOA's threats had inadvertently sparked something powerful, a united front against their malpractices. If they thought they could silence me through intimidation, they were sorely mistaken. Together with my neighbors, we were prepared to confront them head-on and demand real change. The battle ahead promised not only justice for myself, but liberation for others caught under the dark cloud of HOA tyranny. The day of reckoning arrived with a palpable tension in the air, as news broke that federal agents had executed search warrants at the homes of several HOA board members. The community buzzed with excitement and disbelief, a mixture of hope and anxiety as we awaited the outcomes of these investigations. This was the moment we had all been waiting for, the culmination of our collective struggle against the corruption that had long plagued our neighborhood. As I stood in my living room, watching local news coverage unfold on television, the familiar faces of the board members appeared on screen, flanked by agents in tactical gear. The anchor detailed the charges against them: fraud, harassment, and abuse of authority, and I could hardly contain my anticipation. My heart raced as I realized that justice was finally being served. The arrests were not just a personal victory for me, they symbolized a triumph for everyone who had been bullied into silence. Neighbors gathered outside their homes, sharing hushed conversations filled with disbelief and relief. Some even embraced, tears of joy streaming down their faces as they recognized that the tide had turned. The oppressive atmosphere that once suffocated our community began to lift, replaced by a newfound sense of camaraderie. I received text messages and phone calls from residents expressing their gratitude and astonishment. Many felt empowered to come forward with their own stories now that the board's facade had crumbled. This was no longer just about my fight. It was about holding accountable those who believed they were untouchable. The media continued to cover the unfolding scandal, interviewing residents like me who had bravely stood up against the HOA's intimidation. As I shared my journey, I spoke not just for myself, but for every resident who had suffered under their tyrannical rule. My story resonated with viewers across the region, turning our local struggle into a broader narrative about fighting corruption and standing up for one's rights. Days later, as I walked through the neighborhood, I noticed changes everywhere. People were speaking freely about their grievances and discussing ways to reform the HOA's practices. It felt like a renaissance, a vibrant reclaiming of our community spirit. We were no longer fractured individuals, but a united front determined to ensure that such abuses would never happen again. The climax of this saga was not merely marked by the arrests, but by the awakening of a community ready to take charge of its destiny. We had proven that when faced with injustice, resilience and solidarity could lead to transformative change. And as for the HOA board, their downfall served as a reminder that accountability would always prevail in the face of corruption. Reflecting on the tumultuous journey I had undertaken, I realized that standing up against the HOA was not just about confronting an oppressive system. It was a profound catalyst for personal growth and transformation. Initially, I had felt isolated, facing a barrage of intimidation tactics that sought to silence my individuality. Yet through this adversity, I discovered an inner strength that I had long overlooked. As I gathered evidence and rallied my neighbors, I found my voice, once hesitant, now bold and assertive. This battle forced me to confront not only the injustice perpetrated by the HOA, but also my own fears and insecurities about being different in a community that prided itself on conformity. Embracing my unique perspective became empowering. It allowed me to connect with others who shared similar experiences of marginalization under the HOA's reign. Watching my neighbors unite transformed the dynamics of our community. We moved from whispered grievances to open discussions about our rights and what we could achieve together. No longer were we simply victims in a hostile environment. We became allies in a movement dedicated to accountability and reform. Seeing this shift filled me with hope, as it signified that our community was evolving toward a more inclusive and equitable future. The arrests of the HOA board members served not only as justice for our individual grievances, but also as a collective victory that underscored the power of resilience. The fear that had once permeated our neighborhood began to dissipate, replaced by a newfound camaraderie. Neighbors who had once kept their heads down now engaged actively in community affairs, advocating for fair practices and transparency within the association. This experience revealed how crucial it is to challenge systems of oppression. Doing so can yield transformative change not just for oneself, but for an entire community. It reinforced the belief that when individuals come together to fight injustice, they can inspire a ripple effect of empowerment and solidarity. Moving forward, I committed myself to ensuring that our hard-won progress would not be easily forgotten. My journey taught me that standing up against adversity has the potential to spark significant change, both within us as individuals and within the communities we inhabit. With newfound purpose, I resolved to advocate for fairness and accountability continuously, working alongside my neighbors to create a thriving community where everyone felt valued and heard. In embracing this role, I found fulfillment in knowing that our fight extended beyond personal victory. It was about crafting a legacy of justice for generations to come. As I reflect on the journey that led to this pivotal moment, I am reminded of the immense power that lies within individuals when they choose to stand up against oppression. My experience with the HOA taught me that resilience is not merely about enduring hardship. It is about transforming that adversity into a force for change. Each struggle illuminated the importance of community solidarity, revealing how collective action can dismantle systems of injustice and restore hope. Throughout this ordeal, I learned that empowerment often comes from the unlikeliest of places. Initially, I felt alone and vulnerable in my fight against an established authority that sought to silence my voice. Yet, as I rallied my neighbors and shared our stories, we discovered a shared strength that transcended our individual fears. This movement became a testament to the impact of standing together, a reminder that when people unite under a common cause, they can challenge even the most entrenched powers. However, this victory also serves as a cautionary tale. Vigilance is necessary in local governance to prevent similar abuses from occurring in the future. The downfall of the HOA board should not be seen as an endpoint, but rather as a catalyst for ongoing accountability. It is crucial for residents to remain engaged and informed about the workings of their associations. Transparency must become a priority, ensuring that those with power are held accountable for their actions. As we move forward, let us commit to fostering an environment where every voice is valued and heard. We must encourage open dialogue about governance and empower residents to speak out against any form of intimidation or corruption. By establishing clear channels for reporting grievances and actively participating in community decision-making processes, we can create a culture of trust and accountability. In conclusion, my journey has reaffirmed my belief in the strength of resilience and the importance of collective action. The fight against injustice is ongoing. It requires dedication and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. Together, we can cultivate communities that prioritize fairness, transparency, and inclusivity, ensuring that future generations inherit a legacy defined by justice rather than fear. Let this be a rallying cry for all who seek empowerment. When we stand united against oppression, we can create lasting change that echoes through time.